and good afternoon. I hope you are doing well today. Welcome to the second episode of In It to Win It, because in life, if you want to win in life, you have to get perspective from all different kinds of people. And I like to do that with the interview process that we do on this show. This is episode number 2. I'm your host, Sean Lanigan. This is In It to Win It on WFTU radio station 5 Towns College, 1570 on the AM dial. I am here with the head of career services, Krysti O'Rourke. Thank you for joining us this afternoon.
Thank you, Sean. Happy to be here.
Absolutely. And I got the idea to do this episode because a couple of weeks ago, I went on my second Zoom for JVC Broadcasting. I had my first Zoom back in late February, because that's when I saw the Schoology posting, and that was the first interview. And then a couple weeks ago, we had the second Zoom with a multi-student, which was the first time I ever took part in one. Yeah. And I'm guessing with everything now, that might even be a common thing with the multiple candidate computer setup. And when I was there on the Zoom, it gave me the idea to do this kind of show, this episode for like job interview tips. But I guess we'll start there quick with everything going on. The multi-candidate online, is that something that could be normal also with everything going on, like more common?
Yes, absolutely, Sean. I mean, we're seeing more and more employers are reaching out, and we're doing these like initial group interviews. So it was called, they did that on ground. Many companies did that. So it was a way of almost screening candidates for the next step. So this is really done very easily through Zoom. And, again, using it instead of the on-ground career fair, that we used to do, this has become a very effective way of employers reaching out and getting candidates. And just being prepared for that environment is really important.
I hear this a lot with a lot of the things I read about the job interview process. And this question, it was either the first or second question asked. How important is it now? I mean, I know the answer because I've been reading about it and it happened at my interview. How important is it to research the company you're working for, and what's the reason you think people don't do it before their interview?
Well, people don't do it before because maybe they just don't know. And I think it's really important to get the message out there for the potential candidates to do your homework and research that company prior. And it's all about that interview cycle, which I always tell students, that prepare, practice, perform, and follow up. So that's like a continual cycle. And within that, in that preparation piece, that's where you have that research component where you're really looking into the company and finding things about them that maybe is not just as visible as you would think. And the last thing you'd want to do is walk into an interview and have the first thing, I think the two first most difficult questions are, tell me a little bit about yourself, that kind of open-ended question, because that could be overwhelming to answer. And then, the other one is, what do you know about us? What do you know about our company? And what would happen, Sean, if you didn't do any research on the company?
I definitely wouldn't feel very confident. No, I'm somebody, I have to research it because I know those questions are going to be asked. And I would think it also shows that you have a desire to work for the company. You have to know the company to have a desire to work for them. If it's a NBC or a CBS, you have to at least know a combination of the news shows or how it's formatted. Those things are crucial. And you just said that, people have a hard time with the question, tell me about yourself. And it's interesting because I have some professors here who have said to me, well, everybody's favorite topic is themselves. Talking about yourself is the easiest thing you could do. And maybe that's not meant for the work format. Maybe it's meant for other places, but with tell me about yourself with an interview, why do you think people struggle with that? Do they not really know what to highlight, maybe?
Yes, I think definitely you hit the nail on the head. You want to be able to effectively kind of give them a summary of who you are without going on a tangent. So if you're just talking to someone socially or sitting with friends or family, and you want to talk about yourself or talk about what's going on in your world, but having something on the professional end where you really want to be able to portray to that, that employer, prospective employer, that you have, prepared what you want to say and highlighted those definite things that you want them to hear right off the bat. It's really important.
Sure. And like you said, you don't want to go off on a tangent, I guess, where I like to get up in the morning and walk on the beach, and you don't want, obviously you don't want to say things like that. And so that's interesting. And with biggest strengths, that's another one that people seem to struggle with. Is that the same thing? Like they don't know what strengths to highlight? Does that tie in?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, and the thing is just going quickly back to that, tell me about yourself.
Sure, we can go back to that.
Yeah, you don't, years ago I remember I interviewed someone and I asked that question, and really they did go, and this was a person who was seasoned. They told me a whole soliloquy about, just so specific of what they do, and they started talking about their family, and they talked about their dog, and so you want to make sure that you have like maybe 5 or 6 sentences to talk about who you are and where you want to go very kind of efficiently and effectively as well. And then talking about strengths, that's another kind of tough question, and you want to be able to, again, do your research on the company, and this could be a whole program talking about the research on the company, but researching the job description that you are applying for. Really important, because you want to pull out strengths about you that can portray or speak to that job description and what they're looking for. And you want to be able to, pull those out, because again, remember, the employer is looking for, they want you to want the job, but they're looking for how you can effectively handle the position. So you want to kind of work your strengths around that and speak to that and not make things up, like try to pull out the things that you're strong that you can, add to the company in that way.
Do employers with questions like that, do they get tired of the cliche answers with biggest strengths? Do they get tired of hearing, oh, I'm always on time, I work really hard? Like, how many employers are, you want to be honest, obviously.
Yes.
You want to be honest. You don't want to put on an act. But how many employers are looking for the interviewers to just, give me something different, give me something creative instead of the same old? Do they tell you a lot of that?
Yeah, I've heard that, and sometimes they may ask the question to pull that out. Again, you want to be creative but professional at the same time, and not try to. Right. Again, interviewing is very tricky because you don't know the person on the other end who's interviewing you. So someone might be very impressed by you saying a quirky answer to a question that might kind of enlighten them, or someone might be offended. So you kind of have to tread that, tread that way there. The little thunder coming on in here.
Little thunder. We had some, a sidebar, we had some thunder, and it felt like the lightning hit the building earlier I was in the PC lab, but little sidebar there. And, I also think with strengths is that in terms of reading nonverbal communication, is there a way that when students or candidates are answering a question like that, I'm a big believer. I started maybe a semester ago reading books. I'm fortunate to have a public library that has all these like books on all these topics, and there's topics on like communication and all sorts of, and what intrigued me was what I maybe want to do for a career like later on is a lot of either TV anchors or a lot of anchor people, they start these careers as like communication coaches, and they'll form these companies to like help not just regular people, but like top people, like if they want to communicate better. And what's the best way for maybe candidates to practice reading nonverbal communication so if they're answering a question a certain way, they can kind of pivot? Do you think?
They can. So
is there a way for them to get better at reading nonverbal communication so that they know when to pivot if they're giving an answer they don't like? Is it just something that's just practice in reading, or
I think, you know what, it's again goes back to that, who's interviewing you and how you
Right.
can, but I think you can, because when you're looking at the person answering it, you can, I mean, sometimes an interviewer is going to be very like kind of stone-faced, that's
Sure,
how they
sure.
interview.
Right, professional,
Others are
yeah.
a little bit more like, you can kind of read them, so you might see a head nod or a smile, or someone that kind of looks annoyed, or maybe they're bored and they start looking at their paperwork or looking around, so then maybe you could take that and kind of pivot it around a little bit too, so they don't, so that you can kind of capture them. So I think that nonverbal, again, in a world of virtual right now,
Right,
it's a
right.
little more difficult, I think, to pick up the nonverbal, but, because you're focused on yourself and what you're saying, and rather than being in a room with someone, and you can't really pick up on all the body language, but I think you definitely could if someone, what if the interviewer yawns, or what if then,
Sure.
again, you
Right,
might just
right.
be able to take that around and pivot it over.
You mentioned that it depends on where you interview, and I guess I remember the first time years ago when I saw on TV that a lot of the tech companies out, a lot of them are out west, obviously in Silicon Valley, and a lot of them, it was the work environment of just like kind of just couches everywhere and like chair. And I remember, like, to me years ago, I'm like, wow, this looks it looks unusual for a work environment. And if somebody researches a company, could that be a better indication of like the company culture? Like, if you're going to a company where it's like a relaxed vibe, maybe that's a good way to know how to interview, or
Yes, it is, but at the same time, you want to be cautious with that.
Sure,
I've
sure.
had interns in the past that they were at a major label, and they came back to me, and this is years ago, and he's very upset because he didn't get the interview. And I knew the people there, and they were kind enough to give me some feedback on how this student did, and very young, kind of cool vibe. It was the label, it was the A&R department, and they were laid back, and just dressed super casually and all that. And they started just talking amongst themselves. It was more like instead of a group interview, you have the reverse, a panel. So that means that more people are interviewing just one person. So you might have a bunch of the staff interviewing the one candidate.
Sure.
And that's what this was. And he started feeling so comfortable that he started talking about his girlfriend and his personal life and all of that stuff. And not just, they made him feel so comfortable that, he started going off, and they didn't want that, so they called me and said, listen, we just kind of felt like, yes, we're comfortable and we're cool and casual, but we didn't want the candidate wanted them to be on the professional side, so you might think, okay, that's a trick or a trap, but I say always stay, again, even though the environment looks great, you always, while you're interviewing, maybe when you
Right.
get there, then you can put the flip-flops on and hang out.
when you get there, when you're well established and you've built something there. And I was watching a documentary about Atari, and they actually started that decades ago, of just like flip-flops. Atari,
Yes.
the video game company, they
Yep.
actually was one of the companies that started that. You mentioned quickly a trap. Have you heard of traps? Because years ago, and it's interesting you brought that up. When I worked in retail years ago, I won't say the company. I felt like there was a trap, and they actually told me after. There was a worker I had not seen. I had just started there, that actually said, come on, we're gonna go hang out and just go eat. And I had not. Obviously, it wasn't a break. I hadn't punched out yet. He's like, no, nobody's gonna mind. It's okay. Let's go to this fast food place, get something to eat. They're not gonna mind. And I was in high school when I had this retail job, and I didn't fall for the trap because it just didn't seem right.
You just did, your gut said no. Yeah.
It didn't seem right, and they told me after that, you didn't fall for the trap. Or is that something that companies still do? They'll maybe not the same way, like we're going to send somebody in to see if they'll fall for something. But do you still hear about traps since you brought it up?
Well, not as traps. I think employers are becoming more savvy in their interview process. So
Right.
they might ask you to do a project and send it back to them, maybe not at internship level, or maybe I've heard some internship level. So again, that maybe isn't a trap, but it's a way to kind of, to say, oh, I'm great at graphics, I'm a great audio, person, I really know Excel. Okay, here's a spreadsheet. This is a project I'd like you to get back to me by tomorrow morning at 9. Okay, so then that's giving them a task to do, and they're testing you, so it's not really a trap. It could be a trap if you
don't really know the material and the software.
Right. And again, we talk about, you were saying before, Sean, like, okay, I'm a great team player, I'm super motivated, I'm this and that. And employers will ask, a behavioral question maybe to address that. So, when was it, when can you tell me or describe a time that you really can demonstrate your teamwork? Or can you tell me a time that you really held a leadership role or were able to resolve an issue? And, you have to be prepared to be able to say that, oh, I'm really good with people. So give me specifics, because anybody can say those things.
Sure.
So we want to be, true to the test.
It's interesting you say resolve an issue, because one of the things I read in the communications books I read is that people think that when they work on their communication skills, whether it's public speaking or regular verbal, nonverbal, whether it's regular talking or coming up with the right pitch, the right presentation, one of the things that comes out in the book is the author tries to convince them, see, people think it's just for their professional life, so they kind of just, I'm only doing this for my professional life, but this is like in every situation thing, and the author always brings up there could be scenarios in your personal life where the right communication can really, the right tone, the right words, that can all be crucial, not just in professional. Solving a verbal conflict between two friends and family members. So, you would agree it's in every form of like life and speaking.
Absolutely. I mean, that just kind of goes throughout. And again, you're going to act a little differently professionally versus maybe personally when you're very comfortable.
Right.
But I know yes, 100%. And I think that, your communications and how you speak to people, and this is even after you get a job and go for promotions or move up within a company or whatever it might be, you have to, and working with clients, working with customers, it kind of moves into that from interviewing, those communication skills and how you present. And a lot of times it is what you say, but even more importantly, it's how you say it.
Sure.
And employers are always saying to me when I talk to them, I know I can train them. I need them to be motivated, and I really need to know that they want to be here.
Right.
And how do you say that how do you exude that in an interview?
Sure.
How do you do that? You act, you talk to the pieces, you talk to all the things that you have, your preparation and how you respond to things, whether you don't try to change someone's personality, but you want them to see like, oh, okay, I'm not just going to answer with just a one-word question. I'm not going to be, I'm going to create some kind of, presence that I really want this job.
Right. Coming up next, we're going to help you how to answer biggest weaknesses. I know you don't like answering it. I can just hear you now. No biggest weaknesses. That's, I don't want to answer it. But it is important to answer, yes?
Yes, absolutely it is. Yeah, it's important. It's a really awkward question, and I don't see the employers doing that as much, but we'll definitely talk about that. Sure.
You may not like to do it, but you have to learn how to do it, and you will learn it right after this. This is Sean Lanigan with Krysti O'Rourke. In it to win it, WFTU 1570 on the AM dial. Welcome back to In It to Win It, the interview show where in order to win in life, you have to get perspective, and the best way to get perspective is interviewing with people who can give you great advice and great feedback. I am here with Krysti O'Rourke, Head of Career Services, Five Towns College. Hello.
Hello there.
And we said before the break that we're going to address biggest weaknesses. And we know a lot of candidates, they don't like this question for a variety of reasons. Is the first, I would think the first obvious reason, because I used to hear this. In fact, I used to do this. This was a big interview mistake years ago. So I used to do it until I started really thoroughly studying and learning it. And I'm sure a lot of other people do this too. I'm sure you've heard this. Well, Krysti, Mrs. O'Rourke, I'm going to go in and say I have no weaknesses because that just makes me the perfect candidate. And they're going to be so impressed when they hear I have no weaknesses. They're just going to say, "Great, you're hired. No weaknesses. Let's go." But that does not work for companies, obviously, correct?
Yes, absolutely. And again, it's all about, being real, and
Sure.
being yourself too. So, I mean, everybody has weaknesses, and everybody wants to be able to, they should be able to look at themselves and resolve it. So, you want to be able to, again, I think always going back to that job description and looking for what needs to be done and maybe picking something out that might not be something that is going to be, really going to hurt you as far as getting that position. But whatever weakness it is, you want to, and again, many people have heard this before, you want to be able to turn that around and say how you resolved and was able to look at that weakness and how you're working on making that weakness a strength, or a more, a stronger part of who you are, And that's why we hire people. You hire people because they work together, and not everybody, you don't want everybody the same. You want someone to be stronger one way and then somebody to stronger or weaker another way. So, or not weaker, but someone that they can feed off each other.
In fact, we recently had done that before the JVC interview. We found a way to take a weakness and make it into a strength. We went with the fact that I want to start projects and assignments right away. I want to start them right away. I don't want to wait because I like working better when I plan ahead. I have a lot done, and then I give myself the last week or so to review it and look at it. So, it's good to have an answer because we went over that, together.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and again, that goes back to preparing and practicing because the more that you do that, it's kind of like going into an exam, like that you didn't do anything for.
Sure.
Okay, so your nerves are going to be above and beyond. So your nerves are what really everybody's going to be. If you're not nervous before you go on an interview for a position you want, there's something wrong. I mean, you're going to always be nervous. But if you feel like you are prepared and you've practiced for that interview, you practice responses to questions, and you have kind of spoken them out to yourself or to someone else in practice, you're going to feel that much more confident about going in there.
I'm currently taking broadcast announcing with Professor Mike Quick. In fact, Matt O'Leary, the station general manager, he helps with that class, and he'll say it also. Professor Mike Quick says every time we're like performing, or we've only done like a few things like radio newscasts in the semester, he says, if you're nervous, that means that you care. You just can't be afraid. But if you're nervous, that means that you care.
Absolutely, and I think you want to be able to be. I think a good tip is to practice in front of if you can't practice with a friend or someone else, practice in front of the mirror. Practice and then you could see your inflection in your voice might change with your your facial expression and your body language too, and that's really important because the more that you can get speaking it out is makes it that much more easy for you, So, but I know being nervous is a good thing, and I always tell students, and I know this is a hard thing because it's more work, or students or alumni, go for a job, even when you're a senior, go for jobs that it's not like that crazy if you don't get it. So that maybe you're not as nervous about it and you're just going to be a little bit more yourself. And you learn from every experience you go for.
And you're practicing, obviously, a real world, not even a simulation. It's a real interview.
And whatever interview you go on, and again, going for a lot of interviews is great and it's a lot of work, but you always learn.
Sure.
You always learn, and you learn the environment and you learn where it is and, who that person is. I mean, one of my first interviews, I'll never forget, it was this gentleman who, he didn't even wince. He looked just like a stone. He didn't even make any, I don't even know if he blinked, so it's very hard to talk about because you talk about communication. It's hard to be able to portray your ideas and express yourself when that person is almost like you're talking to a wall.
Right.
But some people have that. They want to stress you out. They want to see how you handle yourself, know. So it is very interesting.
Let's talk about dress and dressing. And this seems to be something that comes up that people just don't seem to do either. Why do you think the reason is? Do people just not dig dress clothes?
Yeah, I know. And I think, again, and especially, I mean, all the classes, this always comes up,
Sure.
can I show off my tattoos, or can I show, is it okay to wear piercings, or, can I wear this and then the shirt is like all wrinkled, and, again, until you get there, and again, maybe you go with the wrinkled shirt and not dressed well, and you find out you don't get the job, and then you look back and say, oh, maybe I didn't get it because I didn't appear in the right clothing. But I think that, I think being dressed, and even being dressed for a virtual interview, like not wearing, SpongeBob pajama pants and slippers and a
right.
nice shirt, wearing a full suit or wearing a full, blazer, button down, slacks, shoes, wearing that all together is going to empower you more and make you feel confident about, portraying yourself,
Sure.
rather than being half dressed. Obviously, when you go to an employer, you're going to be fully dressed. But I always even tell a lot of the audio students going for like a post-production position, you think the vibe is very cool. Well, it's not, because post-production is a lot of like corporations and corporate, and they don't want to see, something that is, you would think would be a cool vibe. They want to see more of, button-down shirt, a tie, or a blazer, a suit, slacks, that type of thing. And for the interview, and I say, why not get dressed for it? Because it's going to show that, again, you've prepared and you've taken the time to look the part. And then if they say that when you're hired and you can come in whatever you want to wear, we wear jeans here, we wear, whatever it is, then that's great. That's great. Then you do that. And maybe you decide not to do that. Maybe you decide to dress more than the others. That's your call on that end. But getting the job, I think that it just demonstrates that, you care about the position and you care about how you present yourself. And I think employers want those kinds of employees.
Should the seniors? I would think seniors should, in terms of dress, should have a couple of outfits ready to go. Because a person's senior year where, they could land something quickly. And how many for a senior? How many different outfits? Is there a number? Is there something?
I think, as long as you have maybe, even if you just had one suit or one blazer with a couple of different shirts, or for the female, a blazer with a couple blouses and a skirt and a slacks, like one of those. And then you could switch it up. So if you went for your second interview, you'd have something a little bit different to wear. If you could do two types of suits or two types of fully different outfits, that's fine too. But I think if you start with one with some ability to accessorize them, so whether it's, I would go with like a navy suit, or dark charcoal, blue, those kind of colors with white, and not do any kind of, again, I'm talking and you might be thinking, oh gosh, she's talking about, the banking industry. But it's really, it's not, because, you want to demonstrate, again, your preparedness and be more on the, maybe if you're going as a radio personality, you want to be a little bit more, bring your personality into it and how you portray yourself. Obviously, that's a TV or radio personality. That's different. But I think on the whole, for other positions, you want to be more conservative.
I've had friends in the past who told me, obviously this is incorrect, so don't do this, but that, well, I don't have to buy dress shoes. Like they'll wear they'll get the nice clothes, but they'll get the sneakers, and I'll be like, why are you wearing sneakers? They're like, well, they're black. They're black. They match the black, like whether black collared shirt and the black pants, and I would say, but they're sneakers. But they would just say, no, they're black. So obviously, shoes, not sneakers to most.
Yes, I would say shoes or loafers or something, a tied shoe or a loafer slip-on shoe. I would go with that. And again, after that's all said and done, if you want to wear, or that's good to wear the black sneakers, or on both ends, or the Keds, or whatever you want to wear, that's great. So I just say that it would be great. And all, I've had students show up at studios, at audio, like big recording studios with fully dressed in a suit, and they're like, hey, you don't have to do that. But they were impressed by it because they've called me back and said, I really was impressed at how that student portrayed themselves. And, they don't have to dress like that. We're wearing, beer T-shirts or, whatever.
Right,
we're totally
right.
casual, and that's great. But again, they made that effort. And when you go, again, you want to be by yourself. I've had students in the past go to like really, high-end companies and bring like a friend and have them sit in the lobby. So a lot of different like, we've got a lot
as
of
like a support.
Yes.
Like not sit in on the actual interview, but
No.
wait in the
way in
room.
the lobby. And that's, if you want to bring a friend for support on the trip in, or a boyfriend or
Right.
girlfriend, let them maybe,
In the car.
just stay in the car with a cup of
car.
coffee, or go grab something while you're doing it, because it's that, all these like little things that you might not think about, and you might not, until you experience it, it's all good. Like sometimes you experience things and it doesn't have to be perfect, and you come back and, it's, you made a mistake, and that's okay. We learn from our mistakes. These are all things that, but if you really want the job, you might not give yourself the opportunity to get it.
I've heard stories, I don't know if you heard these stories, of some candidates bringing their parents to the interview. Have you ever heard anything like that?
I have not heard that.
I've heard stories here and there. Now listen, you got to find better references? Probably not.
Yeah, you're right.
Probably not, but
Right.
I have heard that, but that's definitely not the way to go, but yeah.
Yeah, and again, I think it also importance of doing your research on the company.
Sure.
At the end of that interview, you want to be able to, respond as, like if the company asks you, do you have any questions for me?
Sure.
You want to be able to maybe ask intelligent questions based on the company. And those are things you don't want to say, oh, no, I'm all good, no problem, and end it. You want to be able to show that, and always say, like, after with your research, write down questions for the company and the position so you have them. I mean, in the virtual world, it's great. You have your resume in front of you, and you have your questions in front of you, and you have them right there. And students always say, or grads always say, can I go to the interview with questions written? Can I look down at things? I said, of course you can. I'd rather, again, all employers are different, but if you're looking down and you have questions that are prepared, that shows that you've taken that time to do that and ask those questions about the position and the company.
One of the things I picked up from last spring's Zoom event with Professor Bridget Boyle and her old colleague that she had in, the old colleague liked the candidate who had the notebook and the pen and would write stuff down when they first started. So that definitely caught my eye, because I'm still somebody who uses the notebook and the pen. And have you heard of other companies that say, when you start out, bring the notebook and the pen? That's fine.
Yes, that's fine. And it just, again, it shows, like, besides just the whole interview process and the answering the questions and how you dress and how you answer and your attitude and all of that, it's about, like, be caring about what you do. And I think, just say I have an employee, and they're like, okay, and they just nod on a task that I've given. And maybe they can just remember it, but how about the employee that writes it down and really has it organized? Like, again, you might want that employee over another. So there's all these other little innuendos about an interview that might make a tick to someone and put you over. You might have two very equal, candidates,
Sure.
or three, and you're like, wow, this one did this. Like, you don't know what that employer is going to see as the light. And usually it depends on the company culture and the type of position they're interviewing for. And I might pick you, Sean, because you know what, you came and you really had some intelligent questions for me, and maybe you bombed a couple of questions. You know what I mean? You didn't really answer them, but you did do this, and that's the type of person I need on my team. So those are interesting things of how employers can pick out things about you and what you do at the interview.
No question. And when we come back, I'm going to ask Krysti O'Rourke my opinion about how, as candidates and in general, why we should live like CEOs. I'll ask that question when we come back. This is Sean Lanigan with Krysti O'Rourke with In It to Win It on WFTU 1570 on the AM dial. Welcome back to In It to Win It on WFTU 1570 on the AM dial. I am your host, Sean Lanigan, with Krysti O'Rourke of Career Services, and I said before the break that I was going to ask a question about living like a CEO, and one of the things that I truly believe in, not just for work, but in life is, and I always believed this when I was younger, I'm very fortunate. I was raised by a lot of great people who taught me a lot of great things, and I'm a big believer, especially with technology today. There's a camera everywhere, right, where students, candidates, everybody, you just kind of have to be careful of where you are, who your friends are, how you act. And it's interesting. An example I'll use is, I grew up a Yankees fan, and, the former, Derek Jeter was, anybody who grew up a Yankee fan when I grew up a Yankee fan, Jeter was the player you rooted for. Mm-hmm. And I read a story on Jeter one time that he was out with some of his friends, and his father was there too. And his friends at the time, it was a restaurant, and his friends at the time were like being rude to either the waiter or the staff. And his father, who he always credits his parents as teaching him a lot, his father said that, you have to watch who your friends are. He's like, Dad, what do you mean? I'm not the one who was being rude. He's like, right, but you're the famous person. You're Derek Jeter. You play for the Yankees in New York. It's going to reflect on you. Now, look, obviously, I don't know if that example applies here because he's a prominent figure, but I think students and candidates should apply to some of those things to themselves.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's like association. You know what I
Sure,
mean? People
sure.
associate you, so it could even be like, again, we talk about an artist, and people always say if they get bad press, and maybe the bad press is good press for them, but people say, oh, I heard that this artist or this famous actor, they're nasty, and they're not nice to people.
Sure.
So it is about how you should be able to conduct yourself. Those prominent people that you want respect. I think that's so yeah, carry yourself with respect at all times. I mean, even if you're a student, you're a student. Like, try to learn those behaviors. I mean, there is a time and place, but you want to be able to conduct yourself, and that might even lead into the the interview process. As far as companies definitely go on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram, and they look to see and a lot of times you put that private setting if that's what you want to do, but those could be red flags for an employer to see how you conduct your life. And I think a lot of times, the segue is here, Sean, you're talking about your professional to your personal life. And a lot of times, a person doesn't change. Like a person, you are who you are. And you can make those changes, which is great, and tweak who you are. But, if you're someone that has that high, standing for yourself, you conduct yourself in all different ways and know where your surroundings are, because that client could be a potential employer, or that potential employer could provide something else for you, so these things kind of all, or you're a friend, a family member, those are all things on, how you are and how you conduct your personal and professional life.
No question. Another common thing that I know we've discussed is how long the interview answer should be to the interview question. And it's a balancing act, because obviously you don't want to go off on a tangent, but you don't want to do the dreaded yes or no either. How long should it be? Is there a specific time, do you think?
Like studies show, you should have it and again, you're not going to sit there with a timer. So you don't want that to be unnatural, but like 30 to 60 seconds. Okay. So again, you don't want to ramble on and on for minutes and minutes and minutes. Mm-hmm. But you also, again, you don't want to be too shortened, because you want to be able to really address the question.
Sure.
You don't remember to think about what the question is and address the question. Don't be someone that's going to circumvent the question, or circumvent it with something else, because then that interviewer is going to be like, well, this person doesn't really know what they're talking about or hasn't prepared for the interview. So, again, it's kind of like if an employer asks like common interview questions, what experiences and skills make you a great candidate for the position? What experiences and skills make you a great candidate? And again, thinking about those experiences that really tie in, not just to say, well, I'm a real motivated person. I'm super, I'm into, think about those specific things that you did throughout your college years and then throughout internships or other, even it could be your job, your job to get you through high school. Those are experiences that you have that if you speak of them confidently and well and specifically to the job, it's really going to be impressive to that employer.
We talked about whether in your office or I think events too when you gave a Zoom, that even if it is a retail job, when Bridget Boyle, I keep going back to that because it was a good it was a good Zoom last spring with her old colleague. The old colleague was at McDonald's and he just assumed, well, I'll just stay here for a bit, but having that great customer service there got him the next job, and then he went up and up. And we talked about how even if it's retail, customer service jobs can be crucial on a resume that companies can look at because they can say it's a customer like service job working with people, right?
And those are like definite transferable skills. Right. And if you just talk about your job at like Stop and Shop or a Rite Aid or whatever and just say, oh yeah, I just work the cashier. Okay, well, no, you didn't just work, how did you resolve issues? Did you make the place, did you make it better? So there's ways that you can really portray yourself.
Right.
So
you were good at biting your tongue when somebody was yelling about change or a price or something like that.
Right, and you were able to resolve that issue and make that customer happy. I mean,
right.
I remember when Tiana Grotta came from WBAB BLI last year at one of our Get Hired Employer Buzz events, and she said the first thing she looks for is a customer service, position, experience on that. And another thing that's super valuable is volunteer.
I was gonna ask you about that. I often read that whether it could be for all age groups, but if you start a student or a person like when they're younger, that volunteering can be great for job training. Now that may not make sense on the surface because when you're volunteering, it actually does make sense because you're still performing work tasks.
Sure, yeah.
Now, you're performing work tasks, but it's not a lot of pressure it's not as much pressure as a real job because they're not paying you, right? It's volunteer. They're not investing resources in you yet. So with volunteer, you could simulate working tasks in low pressure environments, right?
Yes, and you also remember this, in the next level, you're performing work tasks for a good cause or a great cause. And, more and more employers now will have a community service component to them. Some of these large corporations, they want to see that. So that, Sean Lanigan worked for the Red Cross for 3 years, working with certain, that looks amazing, very sterling on a resume. So important to think about those things where you serve the community, through work or whoever what it is. It really is very important.
I'm curious, not to sidebar too much, if they're going to keep it in the fall, because as of right now, for scholarship students, they're bringing the community service. I know in the new world, it's been postponed the last few semesters. So as of right now, for scholarship students in the fall, they're bringing the 10 hours?
The 10 hours of community service requirement back. Yes, absolutely. And I mean, that's for a student with scholarships, but even if you don't have to do, like you were saying, Sean, I mean, even if I wasn't required to do it, just that I served, I taught Sunday school or I worked for, the synagogue or whatever it may be. You organized or worked for certain events, the breast cancer walk or pancreatic cancer or whatever it is, those all, you don't have to do them if they're, required by the school. You could just do them on your own. And again, they're giving you like work skills, and especially if you relate it to something, maybe you write articles for a nonprofit organization that has a certain focus. I mean, that's giving you your skill sets, plus you're donating to an organization
Sure.
that is in need. So those things really have a dual-fold impact.
Sure, no question. And when we get to the end of an interview, there's always the when do I respond? How do I respond? Handwritten, computer email. From your experience, when do you respond, and what's the best way to respond after an interview?
Yeah, well, and I tell the students that, like, it's not, when you're going for a job, it's not like a date. You don't want to play hard to get. And I see a lot of students and alumni, graduates saying, oh, well, I'm going to get back next week,
Really?
I think I'll get back to them next week and thank them. No, you know what? I say as soon as you're done with the interview, to be honest with you. That's when
you had me do it, right?
And I think, the standard is like within 24 hours. So you could wait to the next day, maybe in the morning, maybe you interviewed on a Friday afternoon. You want to have them open up your email first thing Monday morning, which is kind of nice. But I would say that you would want to wait, until, within 24 hours. I mean, if it's a weekend, like I said, you might want to wait for the Monday, but I think definitely that, and you could do it in email. And again, you want to write something that it's not this long, it's an email, but you want it professional.
Sure.
So it's not going to say, hey, had a great interview, I really want to work for the company. You want to have it phrased and pick out, I really enjoyed speaking with you. And, it's going to be like, dear Mr. So-and-so. You want to have it in a professional light, like sincerely yours. An opening and a closing.
Professional letter, like if you're writing a letter.
Right. But you could do it in the email. If you wanted to have it as an attachment, you could do that too. But I think writing an email is fine. But as long as it's in a professional format, I think that always works.
One of the things I've mentioned that I've been reading about a lot of different things since I've been at Five Towns. Reading about storytelling has become fascinating to me because I also believe storytelling can be applied to all facets of life. In fact, an event I covered here, and I forget which event it was. I think it's when we had all these companies online. And
the meet and greet, the employer. We had.
Every question I had was about like storytelling, and they all gave a very unique answer to it. And I think those are exercises that more students, more candidates should do. Like I've seen exercises where, the old write on paper until you can't think, or like I've seen interesting things like where, you pick a random object and you have 2 minutes to either write or say something, a convincing story. Like if you had an orange, is that something students should look more into? Because one of the things I read with these books is they either say, well, either I don't have a story or I don't know how to tell a story. But most people can, and most people do once you kind of show them the tools,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think practicing that type of thing, it would even really help you in responding to an interview.
Sure.
Because I have a whole slew of questions that are kind of strange questions that you would never expect an employer, and they're getting at different things, kind of like, why is there a fuzz on on a tennis ball? And, strange things like, how would you get out of this certain situation? They want thinking skills. They want descriptor skills. They might ask you something. I mean, even like if you were, this is something that's a little bit more, esoteric, but like if you were an animal, what would you be?
Sure.
So they want to find out a little bit about your personality, or what would you be in the professional world, and why would you be that, and how does it relate to your professional, work ethic or whatever it might be. So and that's kind of telling that story. So the more that you have those skills to talk about that in more of a creative kind of way is always great.
So it's almost like it's become a sales job interview, like the way sales job interviews used to do it, where they would give you, like, I've heard stories of, obviously because it's sales, they want to see if you could sell. They would give you like a random object, like a pen, and go out in the office for 5 minutes, come back in and try to sell me this pen. It seems like a lot of companies are doing that in your own way. Like you just said, if you were an animal, what would you be and why? So it's kind of trending the sales interview type way.
Right. And that's like more, again, you can call it more of a behavioral
Right.
type of question. You know, it's not just like, what did you do? Like, how do you do it? And, how were you able to resolve this issue? So it's specific to the job. And that's, those are really telling questions, because you could, again, I always tell students on your resume and about your internship, be you.
Right.
Don't try to be someone else, because once you start doing that, you're going to get caught in a trap,
Right.
So it's like telling a lie, and then the next question comes and it might again be the same, even worse, because you're going to have to try to weed out. So, that is definitely something that people want to see, the proof in the pudding type of thing about that candidate.
Before we end, anything else you want to add for advice?
Well, I was doing a little research too on like what is it now? Like we were talking before, Sean, about the handshake post-pandemic,
Right? We were
and
talking
questions post-pandemic,
Sure.
and I think the best way, like we want to be and embrace, not embrace someone, but it makes sound like you are greeting them. So how do we do that? And like some people say, okay, a little bit of a fist tap, or I even think just kind of like a bow and like kind of trying to make your eyes smile even with the mask on is something that, people from body language get that. And then I thought a couple of kind of interesting questions, or I don't know how much time we have, but
we have some time.
If you worked from home, how did you use your time?
Right.
So someone asking a question like that, so being prepared to answer that. Or if you were employed, what did you do differently to add more value to your organization during the pandemic? So these are kind of questions, how did you work to improve yourself last year? Or what did you learn about yourself during this past year of pandemic? And, again, that might start to fade as we go. But now, employers might just ask a question like that. Like, how did you better yourself? Or what did you do to kind of, hone your skill sets while, maybe you were furloughed or something happened with your company? And those are important because they kind of give you the opportunity to demonstrate that you've still been productive, even though maybe you were out of work.
We had discussed possibly another episode and possibly having Professor Bridget Boyle with us, because we know her background with internships and hiring. So we'll definitely have to try a second show with this show, and to have Professor Boyle on hopefully with us. And thank you very much for coming in today. Thank you for being on.
Thank you, Sean. It's been a pleasure. Thank you very much for having me.
You're welcome. And that will conclude our show. Tune in next week for next week's episode of In It to Win It. I'm your host, Sean Lanigan, with Director of Career Services, Krysti O'Rourke, from WFTU, Five Towns College, 1570 on the AM dial. Tune in next week.